Hello and welcome to today's podcast, which is centering around the health and personal care sectors. I'm Chris White, Head of Cyber and Innovation for the Cyber Resilience Centre for the South East. Today I'm being joined by Tom Huckle from Marclay Associates and Nick Harris from Nanopore Technologies, both bringing years of expertise representing organisations based in the South East region. Welcome to the podcast. So let's kick off with question one. Why are personal care businesses more at risk from cyber attacks? Tom, do you want to take this one?
Me personally, I don't think they're probably more at risk than anyone else. Sean, like we were speaking about just before, was that it's more that no one gets properly targeted. It's more that it's the software vulnerabilities that are the things that are found first. And if you're unfortunate enough to come up on one of these mass scans, or for example, you haven't updated your software and you put yourself on the radar, then you're going to find yourself in a little bit of trouble. But then it goes, that's one of the things, but there's such a range of attacks that can occur. And I know we're specifically talking about ransomware now, but you could find yourself at the mercy of an insider attack as well because of a disgruntled employee that, again, through business means or that, suddenly finds himself maybe out of a job or there's a falling out. And then suddenly, if you haven't put the right security controls in place, you find them copying data or deleting data, and then you're in the same kind of issue as whether you've had a ransomware attack. Just this time, maybe you don't have the option of paying a ransom to try and get your data back.
I think that the healthcare industry has a subtlety which probably makes it more attractive for some of the criminals, and that's predominantly around the personal data side. Everything they deal with is customer data, and that customer data could be of a very personal nature. Somebody that's had some sort of surgery done, they might not want that known, let alone sort of their personal and healthcare records. So I think that sort of the fact that this industry is handling that data day in, day out, criminals know that it can be very embarrassing if that is leaked publicly, as well as the Information Commissioner's Office sort of retributions for a personal data breach. And for that, I think they give this industry quite a lot of attention. And I think we can see that in some of the numbers. But that's not to say other industries don't have the same problem, but healthcare just, I think, stands out on its own as quite attractive. And NHS were subject to huge sort of attack many years ago now with WannaCry. That was largely because they just hadn't updated their systems. But then we've seen many healthcare providers, probably more in the US than in the UK, be targeted just because of the data they handle and the fact that Tom says sometimes things just aren't updated to keep the criminals out.
Yeah, because you can range from, like you said, your small, medium-sized businesses here, where I think it's probably more indiscriminate targeting, and it's just, again, unfortunate that maybe through a lack of investment and expertise that you just find yourself on that radar. But then if you scale this up to, like Nick says, then it very much can become targeted at that point. And like in 2018, when there was that Singapore breach and 1.5 million health records were taken by an APT threat actor, that's when it suddenly becomes targeted. Or like WannaCry, like Nick said, or what is it, the recent one with Ireland, where they were targeted by ransomware as well on that kind of scale. So it varies depending on who very much the target is. And like I said, Nick, medical records are incredibly valuable. So you get a ton of those, and on the dark web, they can sell from maybe between 500 to over £1,000 a piece. So again, it's a big money-making generation kind of field, and that's what it is at the end of the day. It's all about making money.
Next up, why are people so interested in the data that appears on the internet from small businesses?
Because they're valuable to somebody else is the short answer. I think that the two sort of flavors of why people get targeted, and it's simply about organised crime making money. This is simply what it boils down to. Is it easier to sell drugs, or is it easier to do cyber attacks? And actually, it's becoming more easier to attack. And the two halves are, you go down the ransomware route that Tom was talking about, and actually that they don't demand big money from sort of small providers. If you're sort of doing beauty products, and you might be small, but a few £1,000s taken off your balance sheet could really have an impact. So and they'll be doing that by saying, we won't give you access to your systems, or we'll leak the data that we've just stolen from you. That's the sort of the ransom that's placed upon people. unless you pay us a certain value in Bitcoin. You see the figures in the millions in the press, but actually they know these people can't pay millions, but they can just about scrimp a few thousand, and that can really hurt. And then the other side is, irrespective if they promise they'll delete that data at the end of the whole attack, or they've just simply exfiltrated it, is there is value to other criminals. They can predominantly around impersonating that individual. So if you can impersonate somebody, you can create a fake ID, you can create bank accounts, you can probably go as far in some countries creating new passports, give somebody complete anonymity, and then with that, they themselves can sort of further their own criminal enterprise. So healthcare data, that personal, real personal data, has a great value to these sort of people.
Yeah, it's really attractive because it can be exploited. Exactly like Nick said there, it's got a wealth of information on the individual. From, like you said, it's going to have your name, it's going to have your date of birth, it's going to have maybe past registrants, information on your family, names, ages, payment history potentially. And it's got tons of stuff, and it can be used like there for fraud, but it can also, depending on the sensitivity of it, be used for blackmail as well. And because it's got everything in there from every doctor's diagnosis that you probably ever had. So that's why they find it so valuable.
If someone was to call you up and say, "Hi, I'm calling from your bank, and I believe your mother's maiden name is, and your date of birth is," then you start trusting them. And then the next conversation is, "Oh, can you just confirm your account number and PIN code?" And they're just luring you in. But because they got that data to work from, that social engineering side just becomes so much easier. And that's why getting hold of that data in the first place, predominantly by somebody in the middle, they'll collect the data and then hand it off to somebody else to then sort of run the spam and the fraud. But it's, really useful stuff.
You're both right in what you say. I've seen attackers target the healthcare industry data as they see the value of medical data worth more than other types to use for malicious activity, and therefore have bigger interest in these areas. So what steps can small business complete to protect themselves from these style of attacks or incidents?
There is a lot of stuff that can be done, but especially at SME level, it comes down always down to a balance of what can be afforded and in terms of business operations continuing. But there are lots of small things that can be done to really help protect them. Depending on what kind of system. I mean, the top one is if they can, and most accounts do support it nowadays, multi-factor authentication across all accounts. And that's not just for your business. You should employ that privately as well across your own accounts as well. By putting it not just a password, but another means of authenticating that person once they log on to an account will save you most likely in case that once your password gets breached in maybe a third party that's not even your fault, will really help protect accounts. And they're really easy nowadays to set up. So if they want a top tip, one of the things that I found in industry when we go in for breaches or certain incidents is that MFA hasn't been employed across that account. So that's one, that's really easy. It should be free for most people to be able to set up across accounts. Data backing up the data. Again, SMEs, you shouldn't need they shouldn't need a ton of resource capacity to be able to back up their data, even if it's just an external hard drive or it's a cloud solution. But something that just backs up the data. So if they do have an issue or a problem, or that data becomes corrupted or encrypted, they can then go back into their backups and do it. As long as, like, for example, if you're using an external hard drive, don't keep it on premises or attached to the network. Make sure it's removed and it's maybe kept off-site. You take it home with you at the end of the day, or you just keep the critical data on there. And I think the last one I will give before I pass over to Nick is Password Manager. Now, there's so many of them nowadays that you can jump in and use. And yes, it may be a bit of administration setting it up initially, but once you get it set up and you then have one main password that you need to remember, also you don't write it down and stick it on a sticky note on your computer. But once you put all the other ones in there, they're really good at generating long, complex passwords that are different. And that's the key thing is making sure that every password is different. You don't use the same password across multiple accounts, because the first thing they'll do once they get your password is they'll see if that password is being used across anywhere else. So yeah, set up a password manager along with MFA and data backup, and that will really be a good foundation for moving forward and making sure you're much more resilient to these sort of attacks.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. MFA in particular. I also a big proponent of a bit of spring cleaning, and it's not annual, it's something probably on a monthly basis. But firstly, go in and check actually that the account, particularly around identifying where your really, really important data is. So you've probably got email systems, which might just be for business purposes, but you might have a separate system that has all the healthcare records or all the records of certain procedures on your patients. If you know where that is, then look at which accounts have access. Just clear them out. If there's people that don't need access to them anymore, take them off. And then there's no chance that even without MFA that people can't get in there because they just simply won't have the account. And the other bit is actually clearing out that data itself. In some cases, there's a actual regulatory need to hold on to it. But in lots of cases, and it's one of the sort of GDPR sort of principles, is just don't hold it if you don't need it. If you haven't got it, it can't be breached. So go in, look through data that's of a certain age. Maybe your patients have moved on, maybe they're not coming back. Maybe you need to hold on to their contact details because you need to follow up, but you actually don't need the complete data through some of the personal sort of attributions that have been associated with their time with you. So just get rid of it, and then there's no chance it can be used against you.
Yeah, exactly that. And there's so much resource out there nowadays if you want to take an interest, and a lot of it doesn't cost any money. NCSC is brilliant for that sort of thing. So it's got a small business guide that you can go to, and it will just walk you through all the little tips and all the checklists that you can do, which you can do yourself without having to go and pay maybe a consultant or a third-party contractor to come in. So that's they've got some really good one as well.
Yeah, we're Cyber Essentials here, and it's taking that journey from security being a revenue protector. You're putting these controls in to stop you having to pay for a fine or pay your way out of a problem, even if it's just paying to recover, and turning it into a revenue generator. If you can show that you've got these credentials, these even certificates to say, look, actually, I look after your data, come do business with me. It's flipping that around, and then hopefully you'll generate more customers by sort of having those good credentials. And equally, the Cyber Resilience Centre is a great sort of first port of call to understand what can be done and where to start. It is a broad subject. I appreciate it, and sometimes there can be some quick wins just to get you going, and it just needs somebody to just give you that leg up, really.
The hardest thing with security, which we find, is that people look at it and be like, well, it is not going to generate me a money. Like, it's just, I'm not going to see any output from it. And yeah, a good security program, you won't see an output from it, apart from if you have the right metrics. It will say how many attacks that you prevent and stuff like that. But then you get the downside of where people who just wait and go, well, do you know what? It will never happen to me. And we get clients, not all the time in that kind of sense, that maybe haven't put the investment into their security programs that they have. And then when we come to the end of the incident that we have, that we've dealt with it with them, and we've had quite a few ransomwares recently, is it's cost them millions. And these aren't like super big businesses, maybe 1,500 employees based in the UK. But it's cost them in terms of operational and then recovery, million plus to be able to get back up on operational. Their security budget would not have been £1 million. I can tell you that. If they had just invested, probably, I don't know, I'm not going to put a percentage on it in terms of protection, but a small amount of that money into more of a robust security program, they would have got through that process and probably never would have been breached and then had to go through the whole process. So that's the thing. And subsequently, even though you've got the recovery efforts, and yes, some of it may be incurred by insurance, some of it may not, you're still then going to have to report it to the ICO, who then, through their investigations, then may subsequently hit you with a fine. Then you've got the reputational damage on top of that for if it does go public, if it's quite a big one. And then you've got any regulation or accreditation bodies that you may be part of as well. That may also swoop in and cause you, again, issues as well that you then have to deal with later that, again, affects operations and business and the way you run things. So for the sake of starting now, and maybe you do go out and look for support in a third-party contractor consultant, or maybe you just start yourself by looking at NCSC. That investment now, like later down the line, if you can go 5-10 years now and just say, well, we've never had a major security incident. You're going to have some security incidents, but hopefully you put in place an incident response program, or the kind of the safeguards that we've mentioned on this one. And it will be to a point where, oh, well, someone did try to phish us, but you know what? We trained our employees and they brought it up to our attention, or maybe to the IT team that deals with us, and they stopped it in its tracks. And we can see that we had 10 of those over the last year, and no one put their credentials into a spurious website. No one opened up a PDF or something that asked them to enable macros, for example. We hit all these, we could see them coming in, and we stopped them. Whereas the alternative is, oh, I can't access anything. Everything's encrypted now. Now we need to spend a lot of money to get ourselves back online. And that's what we see a lot of at the minute.
Some really good advice there from Tom and Nick. They've both covered that cybersecurity doesn't need to be expensive. Some of the basic steps you can put in place are free and generally protect you from the majority of cyber attacks. There's a good tool you can use to see how mature your cybersecurity is. It's called Cyber Essentials Readiness Tool at getreadyforcyberessentials.iasme.co.uk. It is free and it will give you guidance in a non-technical language to walk you through to a safer environment. We talk about the supply chain within business and how important it is to ensure you have processes in place to reduce disruptions. What do beauticians, hair salons or any organisations within the healthcare sector need to consider?
Supply chain, it's very prevalent, and it's I think if anything has sort of been dominating the security conversations over the last 6 months or so, it's been around the supply chain. Probably the two sort of flavors are you're using an application that you bought off somebody, or even a service that you are using to support your IT and your own production, and that itself has a vulnerability. You've essentially bought the service, but the people you bought it from aren't keeping up to date, patching it, stopping the back doors, and preventing people coming in. And the way around that is to ask the right questions, really. And the right questions are: how often do you patch? Where do you get your patches from? How can we make sure that you've patched appropriately? And just go through some due diligence with the people that you're buying these services from. If they're going to be handling all your data, then look after it properly. And the other bit is, if you've given your data to a third party for them to process, maybe they're handling it on your behalf, maybe they're doing some sales work for you, maybe they're doing some sort of third party logistics for you. So essentially, it's not on your systems, but it's data that's gone onto their systems. It's still your data ultimately, and when it comes to sort of the eyes of the Information Commission's office, they still see you as responsible. The sort of term is you would be the controller. And again, if the third party hasn't been looking after that data, maybe as diligently as you would, then that's where a problem can sort of come about. And it's about finding out, actually, do you, as a company, as a third party, do you train your staff? Do you patch your own systems? Do you use MFA? And it's again, the CRC can help with sort of putting the right sort of questions together to ask. And it's more than just contracting for the features; it's contracting for the security as well.
I think probably the best example for these kind of businesses that they could probably relate to is, in terms of supply chain attack, is a managed service provider. So these companies may not have the resources required to have their own IT tech department, so they outsource it. And we saw this on a spectacular scale, a supply chain attack with Kaseya recently, which affected, I think it was 1,500 plus, or even probably, I think loads more. You can correct me, you can edit it out afterwards if I get that number wrong. But essentially, they were a managed service provider for thousands of companies around the world. They got breached by REvil, who then took all the customer data. And that's where potentially they could. And exactly like Nick said, if you don't have to audit every single one or every single third-party service you use, but like Nick said at the start, figure out where your critical systems are. Where do you rely most for your business to move forward? Is it your accounting software? Is it your managed service provider who's providing your IT? And you can go and run some due diligence by them. Ask them if they have cyber essentials. Ask them if they run a security program. Do they have ISO 27001, for example? What is their kind of security capability from their side? What is their resilience, or what is their incident response or plan for if they get attacked? And that will give you a good idea whether they've taken that into consideration or not. And if they don't have the answers to any of those, maybe you've got your answer in terms of, well, what if these guys go down? It's very likely that I'm going to be massively affected because they won't be able to provide or support my IT, which means then I won't be able to run my operations for my business. So you may want to then go and move to someone who then does take security more seriously, and then you've mitigated that risk as a result of doing that bit of due diligence on your own.
Some very valid points there. One of the things I'm often asked is, what does a good agreement look like? And both of you have covered some really good examples of that. Is there an agreement in place? Has it been reviewed, especially as your business changes? Have you a contingency in place for when computers fail? Just like we practice fire drills and first aid training so we instantly react when things go wrong, cyber now needs to be treated in the same way. I know businesses market and advertise on social media to trade and grow. So how do cyber criminals use this information to take advantage, and what should businesses look out for to protect themselves?
How will they do it? It's a good question. I think anybody that's promoting themselves, putting themselves in the public eye, rightly so. Everyone's got to advertise. Everyone's got to get the word out. It's tough times with COVID. Hairdressers and beauty salons have only relatively recently opened up. They've probably got big promotions on to try and draw customers back in. And with that profile becomes a little bit more attention from the wrong people. And they would be using some of that data in terms of some of the social engineering. So they might say, oh, we're the host of your conference or the event coming up. We look after the conference center. We've just got some questions about your booking. Can you please reconfirm your payment details? They might be using that sort of data. I've seen it before where in the past, staff members in a previous organization were going to conferences and someone would impersonate the hotel they were going to because they were sort of promoting themselves and saying, I'm going to stay here and looking forward to it. So all that kind of thing sort of plays in. And then from social media, I'm sure people would be sort of having links through to their own websites for forms where you can register, you can make a booking, and these websites, probably designed a bit by a third party, we're sort of coming back onto the previous line of conversation really, are those websites secure? There aren't many layers between what the public see and the database of information that sits behind it. So have the website providers stopped stop the attacker getting through, or be able to exfiltrate that sort of database, or even just take it offline. It's not too sophisticated to take something down. So the night before a big event, you're trying to sign everyone up as much as possible and to drum up interest. And then attackers know that. They know you've got something riding on it. They know it's important to you, and that's the time that they'll try and take your system down. And if you've got a good supply chain, you've got a good provider, and you've asked them the right questions, that they don't just provide you a great form and it looks really snazzy, but actually it's secure as well, then it will all help in the long run.
Yeah, it's probably mainly the thing you're looking at is social engineering. So you're going to be in the public eye. They're going to be looking for it. And again, it may not be the most advanced attackers looking for it. It may be, for example, just script kiddies. So people who are looking to test their skills, to put into practice the stuff they've learned online. And if you start putting on there, for example, that you're doing certain things, working with certain companies, going to certain events as well, it doesn't take too much to be able to spoof an email and sending it in. And if you haven't invested time into training, so all the security controls that will pick up, for example, external emails that are spoofing certain domains or businesses, that's where they're going to get you. Or on social media, they'll contact you via the messaging and drum up a conversation, and maybe they'll send you a link to a website that looks like you're signing into something that you're familiar with, or they're going to send you an attachment that they're going to ask you to open, and once you open it, enable macros, and then it's in, and then you've got either a malware infestation, where that could be a number of things. So that's kind of the attacks that you're probably looking likely. And it depends. If you're small businesses, at the end of the day, they're after money. So if you've got a lot of money and you're one of the big kind of like brands, like with quite a few like salons, let's say, if it's a beauty kind of thing around the country or so, then they're going to know that, for example, there is money there. All companies' records are on Companies House, and they go and have a look and see what the revenue and what's been generated over the last few years, and they'll determine what kind of level that you could afford as a business is likely. And if there's any sniff of a chance of making a decent amount of cash, that's when they'll put the effort in to see. But otherwise, if it's like an independent kind of like SME, it's more likely that you'll be targeted by the script kiddies who are just testing. Maybe, like I said, they've done a scan and it shows that your externally facing infrastructure has got certain vulnerabilities that have just come out, and they want to test it. And so they'll test it on you, and then you may get follow up from them. They may just like kind of move on and leave you with encrypted database or a breach into your website, or a backdoor into your website, for example, that allows them then to come back at a future day. And that's the kind of thing I probably would expect at this level.
Every week I review the data of businesses that have sadly been a victim of cybercrime. I see a lot of social media accounts that are taken over by someone else, and this is a small business's lifeline for advertising. Within business, check who has the responsibility of the social media accounts and ensure two-factor authentication is activated. This is an easy way to protect your accounts from being taken over. And just like Tom said, when the businesses receive contact either by email or phone call, take some time to review what is happening and double check when financial decisions are being made. Genuine customers won't be bothered over this. In fact, they will be reassured that you take cybersecurity seriously. We have some statistics from the National Hair and Beauty Federation that state 56% of beauty salons, hairdressers and barbershops have been a victim of cyber fraud. And of those members surveyed, 80% of the most common cyber attacks and breaches were from fraudulent emails. Does the level of information available online make it easier for criminals to design those phishing emails and undertake social engineering style attacks?
Absolutely. They're all one of the same. The first thing someone's going to do is do a little bit of reconnaissance on you, work out who you are, what they know, because the more they can make their email look genuine, the more chances there are that somebody is going to click on the link or is going to engage and pass over some details. And that could be of a personal nature, or very much could be of a fraud sort of fake invoice side. But yeah, if you can say, hi, I'm from this organization, because they know that you do dealings with that organization. If you can name drop somebody that they know you do dealings with, if they can reference other people in the company, which to be fair can be probably found from LinkedIn and places like that, then it all just makes it look that email is a genuine email. And we're none of us are perfect, and and if it's that convincing, it's hard to see. Training is really important, and it will make staff members think twice, and actually it doesn't quite look right. The email address it's come from doesn't quite appear the same. I wasn't expecting an email from this individual, however genuine they appear. So sort of training and awareness around phishing is really useful. So we've got to market. There is that sort of chance of some social engineering, but if you can have your staff go through some sort of phishing training, and there's a lot on there. The NTSC do a great package. The CRC can provide links to that, just to help staff think before they click. Just do that double check before they engage with an email that they feel is wrong, particularly if it comes to the level that you're handing over sort of any sort of details or making a payment. Then yeah, it's inherently linked what you put on social media to the type of phishing attack you'll get.
As Nick said, user awareness is key here to educate staff to recognise when they may be subject of a phishing or a social engineering scam. Encourage your staff to undertake some training. Have a look at the South East Cyber Resilience Centre's YouTube site, where we have some good videos to show to staff so they can see how phishing and social engineering actually occurs. I usually encourage involvement by explaining this won't just be happening to them at work, but it will make them safer at home as well. Lastly, thank you both for your time today, helping businesses in the South East understand how they can operate safer online. We've covered tools and guidance that quite often can be set up for free and disprove that myth to show that cybersecurity isn't necessarily expensive. One of the key things to have in place is a cyber response plan, so all staff know what to do, when to do it, and who to phone when systems misbehave. So for further help, please visit Cyber Resilience Centre for South East at www.secrc.co.uk and sign up for free membership, and we can get in touch to help you along with that cybersecurity journey.